Breast cancer and marriage for me was obviously a trial. It was a challenge for both of us. I think it is something that will either pull you apart or draw you together, and you have to choose every day to put your marriage as a priority while you are facing the hardest time of your life. Hi, I'm Brittany Peterson, and I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2022. I was 30 years old, and I have 3 kids. At the time, they were ages 1, 3, and 5.
And I'm Casey Peterson, and I'm married to Brittany.
Initially, when I was diagnosed, I think there was a sense of shock, and honestly, it felt like for months I was walking around as a bit of a shell of my true self. I was an emotional roller coaster, I think, and so there were times where I was more emotional than normal. And Casey was so great about being supportive and understanding of all of those emotions, but he was my safe place to land while experiencing all of those emotions.
Yeah, I think being open and honest is important, because when you're married, you're no longer 2 but 1. And so you got to be able to express what you're going through, what you're feeling. And if you don't, those emotions are just going to eventually come out, probably in a way that's not healthy. And so if you're trying to keep them in there for too long, that's not going to be good. I think some of our challenges that we faced as a family was particularly around scheduling. I mean, we both work full time, and then now there were all these treatments, all these appointments, and our kids are young enough that they're not in school full time. We have 3. And so who's going to pick up our one son who was in school a few days a week, and who's going to watch the kids while she goes to an appointment while I go to work, and when are we going to get groceries? And just your whole schedule revolves now around getting the treatment that you need and seeing the doctors that you need to see. And so the risk in that is it can create resentment of, oh man, there's no time for me to do my work, or there's no time for us to do what we need to do. But what are you resenting? I mean,
I remember feeling a lot of guilt because I was the one leaving to go to doctor's appointments all the time. Casey was taking care of the house when I was sick, the kids, his full-time job, and making sure I was getting my treatment and taken care of. So I felt guilt, even though I shouldn't have. But yeah, there has to be this mutual understanding that we are going through this trial together. And although it is the hardest thing we could do, we're going to get to the end together too. So another thing I think of is when you have really young kids, they don't understand how to take it easy on mom or dad.
True.
So it was, even though, I was all bandaged up after surgeries, they were still trying to jump all over me. So it was another area where we could work together to try to, equip our kids, make things as normal as possible. However, also communicate to them that mom is sick and what needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was about, I don't know, a year, not quite a year into her treatment. And we had made it through the initial, the hardest phases of chemo, and Brittany had even rung the bell. And then we got the news that actually she was going to need 9 more months of chemotherapy. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. It was like I had been holding my breath and swimming to the surface of the water, and I thought, I'm reaching the surface. And then it was like, no, actually you have 100 yards more to swim. And I was like, well, I'm drowning. And so that's when I reached out to a counselor, and I got counseling for, I guess, about a year. I would see the counselor once a week, and that was really helpful, just to have somebody to talk to that was a third party, that wasn't, involved in, I could just express my emotions in a way that I couldn't to anybody else.
And I started seeing a counselor at that point as well. And so that was really good for me to be able to express to someone other than Casey my fears and my processes through treatment, and just how my treatment changed all the time. I mean, I was going through treatment almost for 2 years, and the turns and twists were just always coming at us. And so having a counselor that I could trust to just spill all of my emotions and all of my fears, and it was accepted well, was, I think, essential for us during that time.
Our faith was critical in helping us through the journey that we were going to be on. I can't imagine not having our community of faith around us. I can't imagine trying to make it through what we went through without God, without my relationship with Christ, because he was the one that I could turn to. He was the one that I could tell that I was angry. Because, I was like, this is your fault. This is your fault, God. I'm a pastor. I'm supposed to tell people about you and about your care and your love. And now I'm going through this. Like, what is this? And so wrestling through knowing that God is good and believing that, but feeling like, man, it sure doesn't feel like it right now. But through it, he just comforted me, and I felt like kind of like a 3-year-old child throwing a tantrum, and God allowed me to do it because he's strong, and so he's able to take the blows of the 3-year-old, if you will, and say, I know, buddy, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah, I can't imagine not having the hope of Christ in our life during that time, because I could look at Casey and know that he is battling this along with me. I can't put my hope in Casey. Although he is my strong, safe place, ultimately our hope is in Jesus Christ, and he's the only one who can see us through and comfort us along the way and make everything right in the end.
I think if you're having a hard time in your relationship while you're experiencing, going through the whole journey with cancer, I think probably the first thing you need to do is give yourself permission to be having a hard time. Yeah. It's hard. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what I didn't do at first. I wouldn't allow myself to not be okay. Mm. And so once you say, yeah, you know what, I'm not okay because this is hard. Nobody's supposed to go through this. This isn't the way the world's supposed to be. That's when I think then if that domino falls, you're willing to say, okay, then what do I need to do in order to cope with the difficulty that we're having? Maybe seeing separate counselors, seeing a marriage counselor. And that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It means that something is happening to you that you're not supposed to be able to endure alone. And so there's going to need to be some outside sources of help.
I would also say don't hold those emotions and feelings against your partner for having them. Remember that this is just a time of your life, and we are being put in these situations that are extremely difficult, and we all react a little bit differently. So the way I go through grief is a little different than the way Casey goes through grief, and that's okay. We need to remember that he's battling as well as I am. And although I am the one going to get chemo infusions, he's still battling. And I would prefer to be the one getting chemo treatment than to watch my spouse, the one I love the most, going through it. So I think it's all about mutual understanding and respecting each other and checking in on one another and communicating frequently.